On today's show, it's the 100th episode of Inside the Mavs. And as you can see, I brought a special guest with me today. And what better way to celebrate than talking about the Mavs winning in Game 2 to tie up their series at 1 game apiece and look ahead to Game 3 on Saturday as they look to take a 2-1 series lead. This is Inside the Mavs. And welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Really appreciate you joining me here on YouTube and also on the podcast as well. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video. And if you're listening to the podcast, give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And you can find it on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts for free. Joining me today, friend of the podcast, friend outside of the podcast. You can catch him, of course, as the television voice for your Dallas Mavericks, professional wrestling fan just like myself. He is Mark Followill joining me here on the podcast. Mark, what's going on?
Kevin, great to speak with you. I need to extend my congratulations. In my life outside of Mavs basketball, I do soccer games. I did FC Dallas TV broadcast for 11 seasons, and there's no local TV broadcast anymore. And Major League Soccer, now that's all under the umbrella of Apple TV, and it's the Apple TV NFL-style model of one broadcast for each game. But the point of all that is that in soccer, whenever a player achieves 100 appearances with the club, there is something special about that. You know, you're part of the Century Club with the team at that point. So that's always a real milestone for players in soccer. You know, when you're playing 1 or 2 games a week, 100 appearances in the NBA. I mean, it's nice, but it's not the same thing when you're playing 82 games in a regular season. So congratulations. That is a big milestone. You're a member of the Century Club now. And so way to go.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you joining me on this episode. And, you know, you started this podcast a year ago today as we're recording, so to be able to be here at this particular moment is pretty special. And hopefully for Mavericks fans who have watched this podcast, listen to it, continue to enjoy it, because we're just getting started here on Inside the Mavs. And speaking of getting started, welcome to the playoffs, Tim Hardaway Jr. Welcome to the Western Conference semifinals for the Dallas Mavericks as they steal Game 2 on the road against the Oklahoma City Thunder with that 9-point win. And Mark, as you were watching the game, one of the things that you've talked about plenty leading up into the playoffs was the 3-point shooting, or the lack thereof, for the Mavericks. That came to life in a big way in Game 2. And for them, I'm sure, especially for Luka Dončić, who was 5 of 8 from downtown, it was a welcome sight for you and for Mavericks fans watching this team be able to put it together from distance in Game 2.
You know, shooting is the great deodorant of basketball. And if you make shots, it can cover up the odor of a lot of bad things that you do. Now, I did not feel like that necessarily was the case last night. I thought the Mavs did a lot of good things. And to be perfectly honest with you, I thought they did things that put them in a position to make 3-point shots at a higher rate. But 3-pointers come and go. But if you do the right things in other areas, that puts you in a position to make threes. But as it relates specifically to last night, what was important about the threes and how they came last night is, I don't think it's any secret that this team feeds off Luka's energy. And for Luka, who is playing at whatever percentage he is right now, I'm not going to speculate about that. But we obviously know he said last series he wouldn't be playing if this was the regular season. He's talked about, that he's in pain, and this is not going to be a pain that's going to go away anytime soon until he gets an extended rest, which, I wanted to get his rest, but I also wanted to keep on playing, if you know what I mean. So, he's out there really gutting it out right now. And his 3-pointer has been a struggle because of, however compromised his legs are, specifically his knee, and the lack of lift that he's able to get on his 3. So for him to be able to come out last night and hit a barrage of threes in the first quarter and have a 16.6 rebound first quarter was huge for this team. And then along with that is P.J. Washington making threes early in the game. Hardaway and Green, particularly Hardaway, a burst that he had in the third quarter, but the threes that Green made as well, gave the Mavs a chance to have one of their best bench games, especially relative to the other team that they've had all playoffs. So there's a lot of things I think we can springboard off of, based on the topics that I just talked about. But bottom line is they went from 34% in game one to about 49% in game two. And clearly, the reasons why that happened were important, but obviously, you can still put yourself in position to get those shots. You got to make them. And they did last night. And that was just, that was absolutely enormous in them winning the game.
Yeah, one of the things that the Thunder are willing to give up is corner three-pointers, and the Mavericks took and made a lot of those in game two. And I'm glad that you mentioned Josh Green, because I thought one of the early moments in that game came late in the second quarter where the Mavericks are up 3. They have a chance to the Thunder to get a defensive rebound to potentially tie the game going into halftime. They don't. Scramble play. Kyrie Irving eventually gets the ball, and Josh Green knocks down a 3 with 9 seconds left to make it 68-62 going into halftime. And I thought that was huge, because not only just for the confidence of Green as he continues to play well so far in this series, but those are the kinds of swing plays that we saw the Mavericks didn't make in game one that they were able to make in game two. And I think was indicative of just kind of the sense of urgency that the Mavericks played with based on what they had to do to get a split in OKC. And I think that was one of the examples I thought that really highlighted how well the Mavericks were playing and what they were doing from mentally being locked in for game two, that hopefully will carry itself going into game three.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to the whole point about if you do a lot of the little things, then you're going to put yourself in position to make threes. 50-50 balls are a part of that. And when you get an offensive rebound, and the Mavs, that was one of the 4 factors I thought that happened in the game last night that were way better than game one, and a big reason why they were able to win the game. Their rebounding went from -13 in game one to a +3 in this game. And that influences three-point shooting in a number of ways as it relates to this particular situation. Look, Green is a great hustle player, and we saw plays like this in the Clippers series as well. And when he's making these plays, I think that kind of energy then feeds into his offensive game. And when you have an offensive rebound, and this wasn't your typical offensive rebound, it was a scramble situation out of the perimeter. But one of the best threes that you can take are the ones that are created out of offensive rebound situations, because one of two things: the defense is either sucked in around the basket because they're trying to get a defensive rebound, or they're scrambling out on the perimeter, and you're likely to be able to get a good look at a three. And bear in mind that Josh was, you brought up Oklahoma City. They do give up the most corner three-point attempts in the regular season, but they didn't allow opponents, for whatever reason, maybe it was just variance or whatever, but teams didn't shoot the corner threes very well. Maybe they were leaving the right people open in the corner. You don't have to watch all of the games to get a feel for that. But while they were giving up the most corner threes, teams were shooting them at 2 percentage points lower than what corner threes are shot this year, and that's a very efficient shot, obviously. So, Green, look, he's a big corner three guy. 64% of his threes in the regular season were corner threes, and that was a big hit. And I thought everything that he contributed offensively was big last night.
Yeah, the mindset, the aggressive mindset that this team played with, led by their superstar Luka Dončić, was evident throughout the course of the game. Let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs. We're going to talk about that aggressiveness led by Luka Dončić and what that meant for game two and how it could play itself out in game three. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, thank you again to our sponsor of today's video and our podcast in Aura, here with Mark Followill, the Mavericks television voice, joining me here on Inside the Mavs as we get you ready for Game 3 between the Mavericks and the Thunder at the American Airlines Center on Saturday, with that game tipping off at 2:30 as the Mavericks look to take a 2-1 series lead. And before we went to break, Mark, obviously the aggressiveness at which this team played with, the sense of urgency that they played with, I thought was evident throughout the course of the game, and it was led by superstar Luka Dončić. And one of the things that has been a story so far in this postseason is his inability, at least until Game 2, to knock down the three with consistency. Going 1 of 8 in Game 1, he was under 25% in the Clippers series from downtown, but came up big, going 5 of 8 from 3 in Game 2. What did you think was the difference for Luka in Game 2 versus what we had seen so far in the postseason from downtown that allowed him to be so effective from distance in Game 2?
Well, I think he hit an early three, and that probably, there was a little bit of confidence there. I think that Luka is a competitor at a level that we, probably can't really wrap our heads around. Obviously, he knows that he's been going through a rough patch, and he knows, as the best player on the team and one of the very best players in the league, that a lot of weight falls on your shoulders. I mean, that's just flat out how it is. So I'm sure that there was, to our discussion about urgency, I'm sure there's a high level of focus and really dialed in on being able to make some outside shots early because of the things that will open up for him or others in the offense. So I think that's part of it. And I think, look, there was a little bit of time spent, and clearly the Mavs, I think this was something, this didn't just fall out of the sky. I think that there was a thought process behind this. There was some time in the early portion of the game that Luka spent on offense off the ball, whether it's Kyrie with the ball, whether it's PJ Washington playing in post-up action, whatever it was. I think that just kind of was a little bit of a wrinkle, put him in a little bit of different positions for shots, maybe not quite as difficult of 3-point shot attempts that he was having to take in that opportunity. I believe that the first one that he made was a catch and shoot situation rather than having to create a step back guarded well and then having to create and try to shoot a step back over a defender. So I think he got some good threes to take early in the game. And once you see one go in, then there's obviously, a confidence that is a derivative of that. So to me, that's what I saw. I mean, I do think the subtle adjustments of how they played early in the game with like I said, PJ posting up or Kyrie initiating the offense, just some different things in the offense where he's off the ball, and it gives Oklahoma City something to think about, and puts him in a position to take a different three and just have a little bit less workload there at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, not only the scoring with the 16 points he had in the first quarter, he scored or assisted on 24 of the 36 points in that first quarter, really getting not only his own offensive game going, but getting everyone else involved. And I'm glad you brought up Kyrie Irving, because as I start to look forward, not just from Game 2, but to Game 3 and beyond, Irving has been a terrific closer for this team in the second halves, especially during the second half of the year. He's been terrific. But the way that I thought he managed the game, really being kind of that true point guard, whether it was the 11 assists that he had, the 2 steals or 2 blocks that he had, I thought as kind of a maestro, if you will, to borrow a music reference, I thought he was absolutely terrific and really just allowed the game to come to him, but more so was able to dictate the pace of the game. I thought Kyrie Irving was terrific in Game 2, and I wonder if that's something that as we look forward to the rest of the series that he will continue to do, letting the game come to him, but more so managing that situation for what the game calls for based on what he's needed to do for the Mavericks in that way.
Kevin, I have a reference for you. I think this is going to excite you. Brian and I have already recorded our podcast for the day, and I said that Kyrie was the floor general, or if you prefer, he was der ring general. And yes, he was the ring general.
Yes.
In the game last
Shout out to
night.
Gunther. Yes, for sure. That's good.
He was great, man. I loved his game. The 11 assists ties his career playoff high.
Mm-hmm.
It was run the offense, provide what the team needs. And I thought, quite frankly, some of the activity and the way that he played and the way he read the game defensively was as well as I've ever seen him play defense. I mean, 2 steals, 2 blocks, 5 deflections, according to the NBA.com defensive field goal box score, when he was a primary or secondary defender, because they do count help defenders in this as well. And so you would see more defensive field goal attempts if you looked at this part of the box score than offensive field goal attempts, because 2 people can get credit for a defensive field goal attempt and causing a missed shot. But anyway, Oklahoma City players last night were 3 for 14 when Kyrie was a primary or secondary defender. It was an exquisite floor general game last night from him, providing what the team needs from a playmaking, running the team standpoint, and just really just, getting down in a defensive stance and getting after it against a number of different bigger players for Oklahoma City. I loved Kyrie's game last night, and I think that we all intellectually know, or at least certainly have a high degree of reason to expect, that he's not going to have another 2 for 8, 9-point shooting night on the offensive end of the floor. So, there's going to continue to be, these great moments of locking in defensively and knowing how to run the team, and then supplemented obviously with the explosive scoring ability that we know he's capable of. So I loved his game, and you really have to look beyond sometimes just points. I mean, Kyrie brings, even though he is truly one of the best one-on-one offensive players that have ever played the game, his basketball IQ puts him in positions, and his natural leadership traits, especially at this veteran stage of his career, that puts him in a position to do other things to help the team. And last night was a quintessential example of that.
Yeah, and 2 guys that he got some help from as we finish up looking at game 2 before we start to look toward game 3, and we talked about them a little bit earlier. But the idea of P.J. Washington and Tim Hardaway Jr. combining for 46 points, going 9 of 15 from downtown in game 2. Washington, we've seen at times be able to have games like this, maybe not quite as much with the double-double that he had. But for me, Tim Hardaway Jr. arriving in this particular moment, especially knowing that Max Kleber is going to be out for this series, obviously, his scoring off the bench, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, that third quarter where he had 10 straight points and was really able to help the Mavericks go what was eventually a +9 in the 4+ minutes that Luka was out in game 2 during that third quarter to really springboard them to that double-digit lead. This is the kind of performance that for Mavericks fans, Tim Hardaway Jr. was able to provide, and what he can provide off the bench for this team, and it was really good to see that in game 2.
Yeah, well, because it was a shame that Tim had the slump that he had in the back third of the season. I mean, I think he was an absolutely legitimate 6th Man of the Year candidate and really needed to be very high on the list of candidates for that award. And then he faded in the last third of the season. If you look post-trade deadline, in the last 30 games, he only hit the 17-point plateau 3 times. But I felt like there were moments in the first-round series that there were players who didn't look like they wanted any part of shooting outside shots, and we know Tim is willing to take those. And so I thought that they missed him in the first round at times, and obviously they went on to win the series, and that's great. But, in the regular season, when Tim made 3 or more threes in a game, the Mavs were 28-12. They won 70% of their games. When he makes threes and provides offense off the bench, it's really, really important. And specifically, to your point, you just hit on this. What made last night's contribution of scoring so important is it came at a time when Luka came out of the game with 6:28, I believe, left in the third quarter, according to the NBA courtside play-by-play. It was at 77-77. Josh Green hit a 3 to get back to him, to put him up 3. Someone scored for Oklahoma City to make it 80-79. And then that was the stretch of time when Tim had 10 straight points. So Luka is out from 6:28 of the third to 2:09 left in the third. There's a 13-2 run in there, and Oklahoma City scored a couple of baskets, and then Luka came back into the game. But also during that run, Mark Daigneault had to take a timeout. The timeout clock is, I think, 3:30 or 3:45 in these national TV games during the playoffs. So, it's not like they're going right off the floor at the buzzer sounding and right back on the floor as the buzzer sounding. So that's 4 to 5 minutes of rest when there's a timeout called as well, in addition to 4 minutes and 19 seconds of game time. And there's a lot of stoppages during that. So Luka got a really healthy rest there, and that was important. What I liked about Tim's game last night as well is he was attacking some. And the attacks put him in position to make easier, makeable 2-point shots. And I've just been around enough people, whether it's working with on the broadcast or talking to individuals who play, like there's something for a shooter seeing the ball go in the net, whether it's a layup, a mid-range 2, a free throw, or whatever. And of course, this doesn't always work. This does, we can't give people analysis that is applicable to everything. There's no 100% cookie cutter, one size fits all basketball analysis, other than score more points than the other damn team. Other than that, that's the one size fits all. But I thought in Tim's case last night, I really truly believe, based on things I've learned over the years, attacking, getting 2-point shots early in his time on the floor, I think that had to be really helpful to him, and the 3-pointers that he made later in the game. And he made big threes in the third and got fouled on a 3-point attempt, by the way, and went to the line for 3. But then he made a huge 3 late in the shot clock in the latter part of the fourth quarter. I think, probably around 3 minutes or inside of 3 minutes to go. I mean, it was a massive 3 for the Mavs at that point. So it was a magnificent performance by Hardaway last night, and demonstrates the value of his scoring off the bench for the Mavs, as you said, especially with them down a rotation player for the duration of this series in Maxey.
Yeah, those non-Luka minutes were absolutely massive overall. It wound up being a 18-4 run and really helped springboard the Mavericks to this win. And with that being said, we turn our attention to Game 3. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, the fact that the Mavericks were a plus in the rebounding department. And more importantly, at least for me, they were really able to corral defensive boards in Game 2 versus what they did in Game 1. We knew coming into the series that the Thunder weren't a great offensive rebounding team. In fact, second worst in the NBA during the regular season in terms of offensive rebounding. They got 16 in Game 1. That was cut in half in Game 2. And I thought the rebounding was much better for the Mavericks in Game 2. What's replicable from what happened in Game 2 that has to carry over starting in Game 3 to really give folks confidence that this, what they saw in Game 2, maybe not the crazy 3-point shooting that we saw, but some of the things that they can do to continue to play close to what they did against the Thunder in Game 2?
Well, number one, I mean, it's rebounding, obviously, that what you just brought up. The Thunder are a very good team. They don't have many weaknesses. One weakness that they do have that statistically is verified is they are a poor rebounding team. They were 27th in the NBA in the regular season in rebounding margin. And, the Mavericks getting out-rebounded by 13 in Game 1 was an enormous detriment to any hopes of winning that game. They were a +3 on the glass last night. The Mavs, by the way, were +1.3 on rebounds from the trades at the deadline until the end of the season. So they were 10th in the league in rebound margin in the back third of the season after they really, changed a lot of the makeup of the team with the trades that they made. So they've got to continue on that. They have to take care of the ball. You just can't turn it over against OKC. They score more points off turnovers than anyone else in the NBA. The 16 turnovers were a killer in Game 1. To corral that to 10 was huge in Game 2. That has to continue. And I think there's 2 areas where they got better from Game 1 to Game 2, and I still think they can get better. One is just overall defense. The Thunder are a very, very efficient, good offensive team. Top 3 in most categories of significance in the regular season, whether it's offensive efficiency or scoring or shooting percentages, field goal, 3-point, free throw, et cetera, whatever. The Mavs had a good defensive game last night, particularly in the fourth quarter, holding them to 8 for 24. But I think if you look at a 115.8 offensive rating for the Thunder last night, 115.8 points per 100 possessions they're scoring, in other words. That's lower than their regular season average, but New Orleans had playoff games against them where they were lower than that offensive rating. So I still think, based on what we saw Dallas do against the Clippers in the first round defensively, and given the prowess that the Clippers had on offense and what Dallas was able to do, I think they can get better there. And I think they can even be more efficient in the paint. Another key factor for me was to go from 32 points in the paint in Game 1 on 42% paint shooting. Keep in mind that the Mavs were 62% post-trade deadline, one of the best in the league. The league average in paint shots was over 57% in the regular season. It's been 55.5% at least in the first round of the playoffs. So they were 42% in game 1. They got up to 44 points in the paint in game 2, but they still only made 50% of their paint shots in game 2. And by the way, Oklahoma City is an excellent paint defense team, but I still think the Mavs can get better there. Obviously, Lively going 1 for 7 and missing some of the shots. If he's just 4 for 7, which is not, a huge number. I mean, Lively shot 75% in the regular season, damn near. 4 for 7 would just be 57%. But I think if he can just get himself up to league average, that would make a big difference right there. So, the turnovers and the rebounding have to be sustained, and the defense and the paint offense need to be where they are, and I think have room to, again, get even better. So, that's kind of some of the things that I'm looking for game 3. There are others, but that's a good jumping off point for us.
No, for sure, because I thought in game 2, they shared the basketball. They had 30 assists in the game, but as you mentioned, protected the basketball with only 10 turnovers. And if you can value possessions on both ends of the floor against a team like this in Oklahoma City, you're going to give yourself a chance to win a lot of ball games. I will say one thing that concerns me, and I'm sure you noticed it as the game went on as well, even with the Mavericks winning the game, the ease at times at which the Thunder were able to walk down the Mavericks from multiple double-digit leads was a little concerning to me, even with the way that the Mavericks were shooting the ball, especially from the three-point line. I think, to me, that just reinforced how good Oklahoma City is and why you've got to consistently and constantly continue to push it against them, because this is a team that, as good as they are offensively, can walk you down fairly quickly. And I thought for them, that's something that I'll be paying attention to going into game 3, is that they've got to continuously keep the gas pedal on, because the Thunder are not going to let up when it comes to their abilities to score on offense.
I felt the same way watching the game. And I really was sitting there thinking as the game was unfolding, it's like, well, damn, man, we're just going to have to out offense these guys. And then they, the fourth quarter was their best defensive quarter, again, holding the Thunder to 8 for 24 and 1 of 7 on threes. That was really important. The Thunder are very explosive on offense. As I just recited, they have so many good offensive numbers. But I do think the Mavs can defend better. And I think, yes, that you cannot let up against these guys because of their explosiveness on offense. You got to keep going. You got to keep pushing. You got to keep playing. There's just the reality is there's no time. I think this is applicable at any point in time in the playoffs, but it feels especially the case because of the potency of the Thunder on offense. You can't afford to switch off for just any point in time. You just can't. And, they're going to need to be Dallas efficient on offense to keep that Thunder offense at bay. And then, can they string together even longer stretches? We talked about that big run in the third quarter last night of holding the Clippers to the Thunder to just a couple of points, a 13-2 run. I think you said it ended up being like 18-4 or something like that over a 4-minute span. When you're holding them to 4 points in 4 minutes, that's a big win, man, if you can do something like that. So, can they have longer stretches like that? And how do you do that? Well, it gets right back to stuff we've already talked about. You limit them to one shot and done on the offensive end. You have to be good defensive rebounders. You don't put them in easy transition opportunities by coughing the ball up in live ball turnover situations. All of these things, all of this is interrelated. And so, that's so massively important. And I think, a couple of other things I'm looking at. Let's just jump right in. Let me put a couple other things for you for game 3. How does Oklahoma City respond to the fact that Giddey has been a non-factor in the series? Do they, look, the Mavs are rightfully so. They did it in the game that they won here in Dallas in February. They left him open a lot, and he's a 34% three-point shooter. They're leaving him open. He did shoot threes well in the Pelican series, not so much in this series. Mark Daigneault said they got used to seeing a lot of these cross matches and centers guarding him and playing off of him and sagging off of him, so they were prepared for how to attack it, but they haven't been successful at that. So what are they going to do there? Wiggins started the third quarter last night. I must say, I would be surprised if they pulled the plug on Giddey in the starting lineup. The leash may be short, and I could be wrong, but it will surprise me. They had one of the most used, most played starting lineups in the NBA. In part, they're where they are because of health and continuity. And so when you've had that kind of continuity And Mark Daigneault said it today, and I agree. I mean, look, Josh Giddey does a lot of other things besides just score the ball. He's a smart player. He's a good playmaker. He's a better rebounder than someone they're going to bring off the bench. But the players they're going to bring off the bench, particularly like Isaiah Joe and Wiggins as well, they're just going to do a lot more for floor spacing. So how they approach that, I'm watching. And the other thing, too, is this is the first time the Thunder have lost in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. They're the most inexperienced team. They have the least amount of experience in playoff games going in of any of the playoff teams. Going in, it was 134 total playoff games on their roster, 75 of which are by guys who don't play, Bismack Biyombo and Mike Muscala. I think I don't think they're just going to fall apart because they don't have a lot of playoff experience, but how you handle your first real taste of adversity, I'm very intrigued by. And they bounce back from losses all year long. It's a very good team, but this obviously is a different situation. So that's a unique thing. And look, experience is part of, do you stick with your lineup or do you make a change because you're really worried about that? And just how do you respond to a hostile environment? It's a team that's trying to now go up in the series rather than just hold serve on home court like the Pelicans were trying to do, which they did not. And the Pelicans, of course, were playing without a key member of their team in Zion. But I'm really interested to see not only how the Mavericks come out tomorrow in Game 3, but how the Thunder come out in Game 3 as well. That's very, very, very intriguing part of it.
Well, that's a perfect way to end it with the keys to what the Mavericks have got to do to try to win Game 3 after what was a thrilling Game 2 victory. Mark, tell the folks where they can find you and what you've got going on as we continue through these playoffs here.
Yeah, not as much going on as I did, sure. Unfortunately. Sad to report, not as much going on, Thanks to all of our loyal viewers who watched all year long, and I wish I could be there, and all of us wish we could be there, giving you guys, the MFFLs, the broadcast that you won and what you deserve during these playoffs. And I'm sorry we're just not able to do that. But in the meantime, I'll be jumping on shows like this. Brian and I do our Take That With You podcast. It's available on the Mavericks YouTube channel. I pop on the ticket sometimes. Obviously, there's the social media, the Twitter, and in Followill Twitter, Mark.Followill Instagram, where there's life stuff, of course, and basketball stuff there as well. And it's always great to catch up with you and talk to you, Kevin. Love the work that you do on the radio broadcast and here on your podcast, giving the MFFLs the content that they want and need and deserve. And so it's great as always to catch up with you.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time and stopping down with me here on the 100th episode of Inside the Mavs. It's always great to talk to you, get a professional wrestling reference or two in there during the broadcast as well. Yeah. So I appreciate you hanging out with me as you do, and look forward to seeing your coverage throughout the course of this postseason and giving a lot of the MFFLs a ton of information with your analysis and still as the playoffs go on, man. So I really appreciate you taking the time with me here today.
Yeah, you got it, man. All the best to your viewers, and keep on being a great part of the radio coverage. I was listening last night quite a bit, and I'll be listening throughout the playoffs, man. Keep up the great work.
Appreciate it. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thanks to Mark Followill for joining me here, the Mavericks television voice, for joining me here on Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts for free, give it a 5-star rating and write a review for you while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, @Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on this video. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.